Hello everyone, it's Chris here, and I'm going to run through the progress that I've made on my game called Expand, an experimental game by Chris Johnson, that's me, for this week, being the 13th week of development. So I'll get the debug menu up, and one of the things I worked on, or I started to work on last week, was was only creating bodies in the physics system when I need to. And so if I come around here, I create a few bodies there, and I come around here, I create a few more bodies. But all the bodies in between this sector and this sector, they're not created at all, which is sort of important because if I show you the arg demonstration level, which I created a few weeks ago, um, this means that when I have the expanding bodies, I don't have to delete and recreate the existing bodies every time I step the physics system. And this is important because like reallocating all that memory is very slow, and I can't just change the position and the lengths and the widths of these sector bodies in the game at each step, because that'll mess up the solver in Box2D. So instead I have to delete them and reallocate them. Something else I worked on this week was in the pause menu. I added sound effects, so you now get different sound effects as you move through. I don't like the current sound effect; it's not really appropriate, but it's just there for now. And something else I worked on this week was just adding more tests to my test suite. And these are all scripts, so I've got the load test button, as you've seen before, and I can jump to a whole bunch of different test cases. So I added a few more tests. One of these was to change the radius of the inner circle and this outer circle, which represent the world. And when doing this, I realized that I wasn't resetting the tweens or the states of these every time I would jump to a new script, so I set that up as well. So I've got several cases here where the world shrinks all the way down or goes too big. And it's all pretty nifty. And so I also worked on sort of doing a bit of refactoring on the tweening system and on the system that I use to represent these expandable sectors. So previously I had one class that contained the code to draw these sectors and to also expand the physical bodies. And what I wanted to do was separate that out into two separate classes. And the reason for this is I wanted to, with this circle text here, I wanted to apply masking on it such that it was only drawn if it's overlapping a certain sector. So to give you an example of this, if you imagine a semicircle across here, and then what would happen is as this text sort of rotated around past this point, it wouldn't be drawn. And that's a really neat effect that I want to have in the final game. And so essentially I wanted to separate that out so I could draw a sector to what's called the stencil buffer, and then based around the stencil buffer, what's in the stencil buffer, I can choose whether I want to only draw what's overlapping with it or what's not contained in it, or sort of whatever, to mask out certain content. And on top of this, I also worked on modifying the sector groups. So here you have one sort of sector group, but in the next test case, it better highlights the ability of the or the benefits of the sector groups. So previously, what happened was the sector groups were just a list of sectors, and what you would do is you would apply a tween to the sector group, which would apply it to all of the individual sectors and not per the group. I modified this around this week so that the sector group can have its own tweens, and these tweens are independent of the tweenings that are applied to each of the individual sectors. So that means I can, easily do something like this, where each of these sectors are changing in terms of their starting and ending angles, so they're sort of pinching in. But at the same time, the group, so the two of them combined, are now expanding and shrinking based around properties I'm setting for the group, which is really neat. I have a few more test cases. So I worked on some things with sensors. So now the circle sensors can be animated and they can be drawn. So I've just got it drawn up here, and I can change the color. So in the game, it'll probably be a yellow color to signify, something is important here and you need to go there. But it's also possible for me not to draw the sensors as well. So sometimes I might want to, trigger an event such as moving the camera out when you go into a certain area or moving it in. And so sometimes you want the sensor to be drawn and sometimes you won't. And then I have I also wrote a test for the circle text, and so I can make it transparent. I can make it rotate, and I can make it scale as well. I also started working on an extra type of sort of property that you can tween, which is the the radius that there is from the text to the center. So you can see this at the bottom here, except as you'll notice, only the right side really curves back up, and that's because of the angle that you start at when you when it comes to calculating the positions of every item here. It doesn't start from the center; it starts from the edge here, and so I'm just going to need to tweak that up over the coming weeks. I didn't get to work on any of the player movement code. I want to work on that a bit later on, and I still need to do some checkpoint stuff before I can really get down into the nitty gritties of creating content. But next week I'm looking into just fixing up, obviously the tweening here with the radius. On top of that, either doing checkpoints or the player movement code, or hopefully both, as well as doing stuff to mask out the circle text when it moves to a certain point. A lot of that code's already written. It just needs to be sort of pushed together so that I can show it really nicely. So that's all for this week. Thanks for watching.